In the case of the 6.5 Creedmoor, its ballistics are really, really good. It has a good sectional density, but it doesn't really make a difference until you get out to like 800 yards. One tag, 1 week, one shot to make it count. This is for the hunters who hit the road and get after it, no matter the odds. This is Drawn West. Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Drawn West podcast. This week is really exciting because as you listen to this, we are currently at SHOT Show in Vegas. It's a dream come true to be able to go to SHOT Show, and we are there covering the show and all of the great products as a representative of the media, which is only possible because of all of you listening, watching. So I greatly appreciate each and every one of you. Since we're on the road this week, we are going to do a little bit different podcast. So we are going to do a throwback episode to the previous podcast. So I know a lot of you probably came from the Western Rookie podcast. A lot of you are new. We've been growing incredibly fast here at Drawn West. And so many of you probably don't know or didn't listen to previous podcasts, but we used to be the Western Rookie podcast, part of the Sportsman's Empire podcast network. And we've got hours and hours and hours of amazing conversations that I still own the rights to that were originally published to the Western Rookie feed. That feed is still active at Sportsman's Empire, but I own the content. And so I want to make sure we utilize those great conversations. And so we're going to try something a little bit different here with this episode. And if it goes well, we might sneak in like a couple throwback episodes here and there, almost like bonus episodes. We will always still do the main show with fresh original content. We might just throw up an extra episode here and there, maybe like on a Friday or something, with these great conversations that we had. And we also have the $2 podcast feed, which is all about like outdoor entrepreneurship. So we just want to make sure we're leveraging and using these conversations to their full potential and allowing everyone to learn from them. So today, this episode is going to be all about rifle gear. It kind of follows on brand. It's kind of in the same topic that we talked about last week, right? We're trying to cover all the things you need to know about Western hunting and hopefully help some people, inspire some people to go on their first Western hunt. So today's conversation was originally recorded for the Western Rookie feed. We are going to repurpose it and we're going to release it on Drawn West here today. Rifle Gear 101. Let's get into it. When it comes to rifle hunting, typically, now we're going to assume for this conversation that most of these rifle hunts are happening in October and November. There are some rifle seasons earlier in the year, and so the only thing that really will change between what we talk about today for an early season rifle hunt, a September rifle hunt, if you will, is really just tailoring the clothes you bring for the weather conditions, and that you're going to have to do anyway. So if you've got a September rifle hunt, I would recommend just using the clothing system that we talked about for the archery hunt. Everything else should pretty much stay the same. Maybe a little bit of changes when we talk about vehicles and transportation. But with that, clothing for a rifle hunt. So we're talking October, November. I think October can be an especially chaotic month in terms of weather in the West, in the mountain ranges. You can be getting brutal snowstorms starting to come through in October, or you can be having 70, 80-degree days. I've seen both. I've seen 75-degree days in the third week of November in Montana before during rifle seasons, and I have seen blizzards in September in Montana. So it can be everywhere, but October especially can really have a wide range on it. And so you really just have to dial in your gear to match the weather that you're expecting. And you're going to be able to look at that, 10 days before you leave and get a pretty good sense really of where the weather's going to be for your trip. I'll break down what I bring. And typically especially for a rifle hunt, I usually bring all of my warmer clothes. I don't have to wear it, but I typically always bring it. The same is not always true for archery hunting. For archery hunting, I usually dial it back. I'll bring a couple of warmer base layer options, but I'm usually sticking to that pretty light list that I talked about in episode 2 of this mini series. For rifle season, I'm bringing it all. Just in case the weather changes, things turn south, I want to be prepared. And what that means for me is that when it comes, we'll start from the boots up. My boots never change. I'm rocking the Kenetrek. I think it's the Outfitters or the Mountain Extremes, uninsulated. My Kenetreks are uninsulated. I think you could go with a 400 gram if you wanted to, but they are a relatively warm boot, and we just move a lot when we hunt, whether it's rifle or archery. And so I just use the uninsulated Kenetreks. Nothing changes with my boots. Now, if it's wet, even on the archery hunt, if it's wet or snowy weather, I'm definitely bringing gaiters. I use the Kenetrek gaiters. I blew through a pair. I really liked them, and I actually used my points from signing up for GOHUNT Insider. If you sign up, I used the code Randy way back in the day for Randy Newberg, but now we have the code Western for all of you. And if you use the code Western, they're going to give you 50 points of Gear Shop credit. I saved those up for 2 years, and I bought a pair of Kenetrek gaiters, and I really did like them. I know Sitka has a nice pair as well, but I definitely would recommend gaiters if the ground is at all wet or has snow on it. It keeps your socks a lot drier. Otherwise, your pants wick up moisture to the top of your boot. It transfers to your sock and goes down into your boot, and you don't want that. So boots stay the same. Definitely bring gaiters. I pack them only if it looks like it could be wet. If it's a dry day, I generally don't throw the gaiters in my backpack. When it comes to pants, I'm usually rocking the same outer layer pant that I'm using in archery season. I've been really liking the Timberline with the knee pads and the reinforced knees and the reinforced butt. I also will do the mountain pant. You can get knee pads in the mountain pant as well. Both of those are a little bit heavier weight than the Traverse. The Traverse is what I really like early season. This year, especially, we're doing a Nebraska whitetail hunt. I'll be probably wearing my Traverse just because it's Labor Day weekend and it's going to be super hot. For rifle, I like that heavier weight pant. And I'll even wear, in addition to my compression shorts for my first layer, my base layer, and then if it's a cold day, I'll throw on either my lightweight Sitka bottoms or my heavyweight Sitka bottoms. The lightweight's a merino. I don't know what the material is on the heavyweight, but depending on those two, so I'll typically have, a warmer base layer underneath those Timberline pants. And as long as I stay moving, I'm generally okay. Every now and then, if we stop to glass for a while and it's cold, sometimes it starts to sneak in. But for the most part, we move enough that we stay warm with that system. And so I have never had to get to the bibs. I know they make like the Blizzard bibs, is like the top end, warm as it gets. We generally don't hunt those late of rifle seasons with those extreme colds. And if we do, we're moving a lot more when those days roll in. So I haven't had to do that. I do have a pair of Kelvin light pants that I'll sometimes bring, and I will zip them, if we're just scouting for a short period of time, I'll just zip them up over the top of my system, and then I'll take them off as soon as we start walking again. I have done that before, and that works really good to give you options, and they're so lightweight. That's what I like about the Kelvin Light line, the jacket and the pants. They're very, very light. When I get up to the top end, I'm pretty much rocking the same system every day unless something is drastically different. And that system is a super lightweight shirt, long sleeve typically. Usually I'm using the lightweight long sleeve tee from Sitka, and then I'll throw the heavyweight long sleeve tee over that. I'm a big layers guy. And then over that, I'm typically running the Jetstream jacket. With that 3-piece set, I've cut the wind so the wind doesn't sneak in, and I've got I'd say some active layers on underneath. So I'm not getting too hot, I'm not getting too cold, but I do tailor that depending on what the weather is. If the weather gets really cold, what my first line of defense is popping on that Kelvin lightweight underneath the Jetstream, because the Kelvin lightweight is a super light puffy, and then the Jetstream is a wind blocker. The reason I do that is you get basically 3 jackets for the price of one because they're both lightweight and you can mix and match. And so that's pretty much my upper body system. And so if you're looking at buying some clothing, it doesn't have to be Sitka. I'm talking all Sitka here, but there's a lot of reputable brands. We talked about them in the archery episode. I know people that absolutely love their First Light stuff. I know people that absolutely love their QU stuff. I really enjoy Sitka. A lot of our group has Sitka. If you find deals on it throughout the year, I think you really will appreciate the quality of these higher end clothing options. But you got to make a decision for yourself. Is that something you want to save up for, or do you want to go with maybe more like your retail box store brands, like your Cabela's, your Shields, your Browning, all that stuff? What I do think is important, rifle hunts, typically spot and stock. A lot of times you're crawling at some point. Knee pads really help. If you can get a pair of pants that have a knee pad in them, I think it's a super good feature. I think four-way stretch in your pants is a must-have for me personally, and a lot of people really like that maneuverability and comfort in the pants. For jackets, I think for sure windbreaking is an absolute requirement in the West. You want a jacket that can cut the wind and typically will have a hood. And then you just want I would recommend a light puffy to layer with. So between those two, you can get a wind jacket, a puffy jacket, or an insulated wind jacket with wearing both of them. And then whatever shirts you like to wear, typically something, that's going to moisture wick, something that's easy to remove, probably more of a little bit tailored athletic fit. So you got the comfort. And all of the big brands will have options for these. And so like I said, it doesn't have to be Sitka, but those are the things I look for. I personally don't bring rain gear, rain pants, and a rain jacket, mostly because I don't have a good set of rain gear for Western hunting. And so I throw in my Alps rain tarp. And if it's going to be a big, heavy rain day, I'll get to a glassing knob. I'll throw that tarp up. I'll crawl underneath it with my spotter, and we'll glass all day long. That way, and I stay pretty darn dry if you set the tarp up the right way. So that's how I do my clothing for rifle season. It all depends on how cold it's going to be, how many layers I throw on underneath. If I have to, I'll throw on more layers. I'll double up. I'll wear the lightweight, long weight, or the lightweight bottoms, the heavyweight bottoms, and then my Timberlines to really get more leg insulation. If it's super cold, I'll throw on another hoodie on underneath my Jetstream and my Kelvin puffy jacket. It all just depends. And then of course, whatever state you're in, obviously abide by the blaze orange laws. Every state kind of has different requirements. Most of the time I'm just wearing a blaze orange ball cap and a blaze orange vest, or if it's cold, I'll wear a blaze orange stocking hat. When I'm planning hunts, I like to know what my odds of drawing the tags are so I can apply accordingly and have a better idea where I'll be hunting this fall. I like to go out west every year, and to do that means I've got to keep an eye on point creep and draw odds so I know which states Abby and I should be applying for so we have a tag in our pocket come fall. Our favorite way to see what the current draw odds for a unit are and how fast point creep is moving is by using the draw odds tool in the GOHUNT Insider Service. We can look at any unit over multiple years to get an idea of how fast point creep is moving and what last year's draw odds were and get an idea of where we stand for this year's application. Draw odds is just one of the tools you'll get when you sign up for GOHUNT Insider that I use on every one of my hunts. Head over to GOHUNT.com and check out Insider, and you'll see why it's my single favorite resource for Western hunting. And when you sign up, use the code DRAWNWEST, that's one word, DRAWNWEST, and they will give you $50 of free credit in the gear shop towards any gear you need for your next hunt. Go to GoHunt.com, get signed up, and you'll see you have way more opportunities than you realize. Real simple. For gloves, I typically do wear gloves in the rifle season. If it's a warmer rifle season, I actually just like a good old pair of leather gloves. I typically like the white cowhide. And if it's a little bit colder, I usually go insulated leather gloves. They're pretty cheap. Pick them up at any, Tractor Supply, Fleet Farm, Runnings, Farm and Fleet store near you. I just really like the way those work. They're easy to use. If it gets super cold, if it gets really, really cold, typically what I'll do is I'll throw on the lightweight Sitka gloves, very thin, very dextile. Or dexterous. You can be very tactical with them, and I'll put that on, and then I'll use those inside like a chopper style mitten. The chopper is the wind cutter and the insulation to keep your hands warm. And the reason I wear that lightweight glove underneath is when you have to pull your hand out to do something, to grab something, to adjust your rifle, check your map on your phone, you're not losing like that all of your heat instantly. It helps just a little bit cut that loss. And then you put it back in your, chopper and build that warmth back up. That's my system for clothing when it comes to these later season rifle hunts. Not a lot different. A lot of the same components that I use for an archery hunt, I just use them in different ways, which is really nice because then you can buy a system and use it throughout multiple seasons. And that's exactly why I went with the Jetstream Kelvin combination. And then you tailor that with like a heavyweight tee for a base layer. And then you can use that same heavyweight tee in the early season or that lightweight tee in the early season. So that gives you a lot of options. That's what I like about the layering system. That's why I don't have a big, heavy, super heavy jacket for the Western hunting. I buy lots of layers in between, and I kind of build that heavy jacket when I need it, and I have all the components to use when I don't. The only thing I have a big, heavy system for is late season whitetail hunting. That's when I break out the incinerator set, big, heavy bibs, big, heavy jacket, super warm and insulated. That's the setup there. So clothing, like we talked about, same components as the archery season. I just stack them up a little bit different and a little bit more often. When it comes to camping, so camping is a good topic, and you're gonna have to pick this based on the style of the hunt you want to do. A lot like archery, we talked in the archery episode. You can do a base camp style, you can do a spike camp style, or you can do a backpack hunt, and all three are very common options for archery hunting. When you get into the late rifle seasons, it's just a little bit trickier to do the backpack style hunting. People still do it all the time, but it gets less comfortable. And let's be honest, there's something to be said for being comfortable. I think a lot of people look to social media and they see people doing crazy things, very hard things, and they think they have to do that to be cool. But if you're out there to have fun and to kill elk or mule deer or antelope, comfort does play a lot of role in that. I mean, you're going to sleep better food, you're going to be more prepared, you're going to be better rested, you're going to hunt harder if you're getting that sleep. And a lot of those things come with having a better camp, right? If you have a big base camp, you have a big tent or a camper, you're, warm, you got a good bed, you're going to sleep better, you're going to wake up earlier. Yeah, you can camp closer to the animals when you backpack hunt, but typically when you're doing these later season hunts, a lot of people are leaning more towards the base camp, and that's fine. You can do whatever you want. But when it comes to tents, I have a couple different options. I have a kind of a scalable set or a scalable stack of sleeping options for these later season hunts. So, first line of defense, or first one that I'll use, is when I'm doing a solo hunt mostly. So I've done this a couple times on a rifle hunt. I have an air mattress that's made for the back seat of my truck. A lot of people have done truck bed camping. This is like truck seat camping. And so I have a full-size F-150 full crew cab. This air mattress goes up where your feet go in the back seat, and then it goes over and across the seat bench. And it basically creates a twin bed air mattress in the back seat of my truck. Now, this was like $70 on Amazon. I think they're a little bit more now, but there's a couple reasons why I really like this. Number one, you don't have to set up a tent. You can be hunting super mobile, drive 100 miles, sleep in a brand new spot every night, right where you want to be. I really do like that. I like the ability to be extremely mobile and adaptable, because when I get out there, especially if it's a new unit, I might not know exactly where I want to camp. And if I spend a half a day, especially when I'm by myself setting up a big camp, it's really hard to move. I've done it a few times. I always feel like I waste a ton of time trying to move a big camp by myself. And typically the only time I'll do that is if the weather gets really bad and I have to leave the mountains for a couple of days while a snowstorm rolls through. So that's line of defense number one, is the truck bed camping. Another nice, neat feature is when it's super cold, I've done this down to 13, 15 below, is that you can keep your, I have electric start or an auto start in my truck. I keep the key fob in my pocket in my sleeping bag, and I'll just double tap the start button. Truck warms up 15 minutes later. It's hot. It's hot in there. And so then I crawl out, get ready, and go hunting. So that's one option. The next option is I do have a backpack style tent. I probably wouldn't use this in the wintertime or in the late season. If I'm going to have a base camp, I'm going to use our Alaknak tent. It's a Cabela's Alaknak. It's a smaller wall tent. It does not have a heater in it, which is this is an interesting part of why it. If I'm solo, I typically do the truck camping instead. Is for that heater. When it gets that late, you can do it without a heater. I've done -10, -15 in a tent before without a heater, but that's really it gets cold. That's really cold. And so if you're going to be doing this year in and year out, I would maybe suggest trying to find a good deal on a wall tent that has a stove jack in it that allows you to either do a propane stove or a wood stove. The heaters in tents are a good topic to maybe spend a minute on. There's pros and cons to both. One of the pros, a couple of the pros to propane heaters are generally easier. Everything about them is easier to light, easier to get going. You don't have to refill them. It's easier to transport fuel. It's the fuel is more condensed. You don't have to gather it. You can just bring out a big propane tank. There's a lot of benefits to the propane. You can get, the same style heater with a stove pipe and goes out the jack on your tent, and then you leave the tank outside, and you can run it all night long without, as long as it's a vented one, without having any issues with waking up and having to restoke the fire and add more wood. One of the cons to a propane system is when propane burns, it creates H2O. It creates moisture. And so if you do have a wetter, colder climate, um, the air can hold less moisture. And so there's a chance that you will see condensation inside your tent with a propane heater, especially if it's really either one, really cold, or two, really wet. Um, that's a con for the propane heat. On the flip side, wood stoves, a pro is that they do not create moisture and it's a very dry heat. So it can dry clothes out much better if that's the plan. It can dry boots out a little better. That heat is very dry, but you have to gather wood or bring wood with you. You have to spend more time stoking the fire in the middle of the night. It can go out. It's just a little bit trickier to use the wood. And so you can kind of pick what you want there. But those are the two options. Another option that we've done in the past is buddy heaters. A lot of people have a buddy heater, especially here in the Midwest for ice fishing or deer stands. A lot of people in our group just bring a buddy heater and they leave it kind of by their cot. And in the morning when they're waking up, they just turn it on for a little bit just to take the edge off. That's a good solution too, without having to go buy a big heater, or maybe your tent doesn't have a stove jack in it. There is something that can be said for that heat source. So think through that. If you're thinking like late November, fourth ricel seasons in Colorado, shoulder tags in Montana, late season, and you're going to be tenting it, definitely think through the heater, because when you're cold, you don't like to wake up as early. When you're already exhausted, you sleep a little bit later. It can really just have an effect on how hard you hunt. So think that through. Another big part of camping is food. You plan through the food. So in archery season, I'm typically eating a lot more either room temperature foods like snacks like granola, trail mix, cheese sticks, pre-cooked bacon, those types of things that are shelf stable, sandwiches. Um, and I'm not eating as much big, heavy, warm meals just because it's hot. And when it's hot, I don't like to eat a lot. And especially if it's like, if I'm hot and then I'm eating a warm meal, I just, it doesn't go down as nice. The opposite's almost true when it comes to rifle season. When it's colder, I have more time to eat usually because it gets dark earlier. That's when I'm looking to have a bigger, warmer meal, get more calories in. It takes calories to stay warm. Um, and I burn more calories when I'm hunting the late season. And so that's when I'm looking for more of those warmer foods. So whether you have a big base camp, you have microwaves, you can like heat up, food that you brought from home, pastas, hot dishes, things like that, grilling, or if you do in the mountain house, or freeze dried meals, whether it's mountain house, peak refuel, um, Alps, Alpaca Ranch. What is it? What are the other ones? Gastronome. There's a bunch of them out there. Um, those are really nice when it's cold to have that nice warm meal, even for lunch, doing a freeze-dried meal for lunch and then coming back to base camp and having a, reheat a pasta or a hot dish or make tacos or spaghetti. The food you'll find when you're rifle hunting, the later it is in the year and the colder it is in the year, the more you will probably eat and the warmer you'll want the food to be. So just think through that when you're planning your trip as well. So let's move on to transportation and trucks. So first of all, we talked about in the archery episode, but you're going to want to bring tools because things break in the West. Tires pop, suspensions go out, things happen in the West. And so you want to be prepared to fix. The rule of thumb that I have is be prepared to fix anything you're capable of fixing, right? So if you're someone that doesn't do a lot of work on your vehicles, we mentioned this in the last episode, you know, maybe that's not as many tools for you. Maybe you just always drive newer vehicles. Maybe you're just like, hey, if something breaks, I call AAA. If you're someone, that fixes all their own things and you have a lot of tools, like bring those with because you're going to find things break. You're going to need those tools. I was just in Canada trying to pull apart one of our graphs on a boat and use my electrical engineering kit to try to diagnose what's going wrong with the circuit board, right? Because that's something I could fix. So I bring those tools with me to be able to fix those things when they happen. So you definitely want to bring tools like a wrench kit, socket sets, breaker bar, jack stands. That's the normal stuff I always bring whenever I travel. Now, when I travel late season or rifle seasons, I bring a couple other things in the truck too. Bigger tow straps. I typically have about 100 feet of tow straps in my truck. They're not all one. If you have a stretch rope, that can be really good too. If it snows and you're getting stuck, pulling people out, bring those bigger straps for sure. Those always stay in my truck as well. But when late season, it really becomes important because the wet mountains can get a lot of snow really fast and you can be stuck. You can be pulling people out. I bring shovels. So typically I'll have a small like foxhole shovel, a collapsible spade, and then I'll have a scoop shovel along as well for like bigger snow, digging out snow banks, that kind of stuff. Another really important thing, especially the later in the year you go, having snow chains or tire chains available. I have a set of 4 for my pickup. The nice thing about getting a set of 4 is if you're solo and you really need them, you can chain up all 4 tires. Also, if you're in a group, you can chain up just 2 tires. So if you're, a lot of times they say if you're an empty unloaded truck, chain up the front axle because your front axle is usually a little bit heavier. If you've got a trailer, sometimes you want to chain up the rear axle because there's more tongue weight and more weight on your rear axle. It just kind of depends on what you want to do. But then you can chain up 2 trucks, 2 tires a piece. So definitely want to invest in some snow chains. I like the ones with the V-bar chains because you get even more traction with those. But invest in those, especially for a rifle hunt, and learn how to use them. Jack up your truck, put them on, figure out how to do it, or drive over them, do it a couple times, and get used to them because you're not going to be having a good day if you have to use them out west, and you're really not going to be having a good day if you don't know how to use them and you're out in the west and you need them. So do that, be prepared. Lastly, on transportation and tools, I always bring a spare tire, obviously, for everything. So if we're bringing a trailer, we've got a spare for that. If we're bringing a four-wheeler, we've got a spare for that. A spare for my pickup. 2 spares for a pickup is a good idea because you can get a lot of issues really fast, and you can pop 2 tires pretty easy out in the West. And so if you have 1 spare and you pop 2 tires, there's not a lot of stuff you can do. I also always bring a fix-it kit, a flat tire fix-it kit. So I have a little tiny DC compressor that I can plug in and at least get enough air to get to town. And then I've got a plug kit. So these are all things you think about. And if you haven't gone out west before, you maybe think this is overkill. But the reason I bring all these things is because I've had to use or wish I had all of these things at some point in our experiences. We've popped 2 tires back to back, boom, boom. Had to sit on the side of the road and get a ride to town. We've needed snow chains to get out of the mountains. We hit a blizzard. We got like 2 feet of snow when we were trying to leave, and we needed snow chains to get out. We've needed jacks. We've needed jack stands. We've needed wrenches. We've done all kinds of things, and we've needed all these tools before, and that's why I bring them. And so I'm just helping you any way I can to avoid some of the same headaches that we've seen in the West. So there you have it on the truck. Tools, shovels, snow chains, spare tires, flat tire fix-it kits. you name it, you'll be prepared. Hey folks, this episode is brought to you by Matthews Archery. One of the things I was looking forward to the most when I got my new Lift X33 this year was seeing how the new accessories integrate with the bow firsthand. I went with the Bridgelock UV slider, the Ultra Rest IMX2, and 2 Bridgelock bars. And what I noticed was how well all of these accessories work with the bow to give you the best shooting experience. The Bridgelock bars go right through the center of my riser. My sight and rest, again, mounted right through the center line of the riser to make everything balance so well. The Bridgelock accessories make it incredibly easy to pull your bow out of the case or to put it back in. Just simply loosen the screws, take your bar off, and when it comes time to hit the field, just slide your bar back in and tighten that screw down. It makes shooting my bow feel like driving a performance race car with everything working together. Not to mention how good my bow looks with all matching components. So if you've been thinking about upgrading some of your accessories or even doing a complete build like mine, head over to matthewsinc.com and check out their full line of accessories. All right, kill kit. The kill kit for me does not change no matter what adventure I'm going on. From whitetail deer in Minnesota to rifle elk in Colorado, I use the same kill kit. One of the things that I forgot to mention in the archery episode, but in your kill kit, if you're doing a pack out, you need to think about game bags. That's one thing we forgot to do in the archery episode, so we'll talk about it here in the rifle episode, but you'll use the same style for both hunts. And I highly recommend the gutless method for any big game out west. I've used gutless method when I was solo hunting West River whitetails, and I shot a buck 300 yards from the road, and I could see my pickup, and it was flat land, and it was still easier to quarter that buck and carry the quarters to the truck, than it was to drag that buck by myself and then get it into the back of my truck by myself. Because when you really think about it, you have to drag it, which is a goofy angle. It's heavy. You have to drag the whole deer. You have to lift it into the tailgate. And then I drive it all the way home. And at the time, I wasn't living on the farm like I am now. So what am I going to do with this deer when I get it home? I'm going to have a carcass to deal with and dispose of. I'm going to get blood all over my garage. I got to figure out a way to hang it. If I quarter it in the field and just take out the meat, I don't have to deal with all that stuff. And I have to do that at some point anyway. So it's just easier for me to quarter things. So I basically quarter everything. If I shot a deer on the wrong side of our 40 acres here at the farm and I couldn't get my tractor to the deer or my four-wheeler to the deer, I'd quarter it and carry it back to the house. It's pretty easy. So it's really easy once you learn how to do it. I highly recommend spending some time on YouTube. Look at how to do the gutless method. There are a ton of great resources out there to do this. Randy Newberg has a phenomenal video on how to do the gutless method on an elk. But be prepared for that. And bring game bags. So our group kind of has a rule when we're hunting in pairs, we only bring half as many game bags because we rarely shoot 2 at one time. But when I'm hunting solo, I typically bring 5 game bags for whatever species I'm going after. And the reason for that is there's 4 quarters, and a lot of times game bags are sold in packs of 4, which is a little frustrating. But on a bull elk, for example, I hope you all shoot, fill your tags. Maybe you got an elk tag. You're going to go shoot a giant bull. I've got faith in you there. Well, you're going to have 2 large rear quarters. You hear us talk on the podcast about elk weights, but the rear quarters are probably going to be somewhere between 60 and 80 pounds apiece. And so that's a good load right there by itself. The front quarters are probably going to be somewhere between 40 and 60 pounds apiece. So that's a good load by itself too. But you also have a lot of other things, right? So you have those 4 quarters, and I typically put 1 quarter in a bag. Sometimes for antelope, I'll double up in like a deer bag, or sometimes for deer, I'll double up and put 2 quarters in a single elk bag. But for elk, I've got 4 bags, 1 for each quarter. But then I've got 2 tenderloins, and on an elk, those are pretty sizable. One of the bulls I shot in North Dakota had 20-pound tenderloins or 20-pound back straps on both sides, and 5-pound tenderloins on both sides. So you got to put those somewhere. You've got neck meat. That can add up really fast on a bull elk. I mean, you can have 40 to 80 pounds of neck meat on a bull elk, a big bull. And then you've got like rib meat, and some various other, trimmings that you got to put somewhere, right? Well, that can all add up and you can start like overfilling some of these bags pretty easy. And then if you have a head that you want to save, and especially if you take the hide off the head and fully cape it out, maybe you want to put that skull in a bag. And so that's why I always bring 5. And so typically what I'll do is I'll put a rear quarter in a bag, I'll put each front quarter in a bag, and then I'll put that side's trim meat. Either I'll put all the trim meat in the 5th bag, or I'll split all the trim meat between the 2 front quarter bags, and I basically make 4 even loads. And then I have the antlers and the head and the cape, depending on how that works out. And so that's the way I do it. I like to put things in game bags, even the head. Whether I'm doing a Euro mount, a skull cap, a shoulder mount, I like to wrap up all that in a game bag just to keep the blood from kind of soaking into my backpack. But that's a big part of having a good kill kit is the game bag. And then once again, I'll just mention briefly, I always bring a knife sharpener, a little tiny knife sharpener with preset ceramic angled blades to sharpen. And then I always bring the Randy Newberg EBS, the Exchange Blade System knife. So this knife has a serrated knife blade in it. It has a short, smooth knife blade, and then it has a longer, smooth knife blade in it. And these are heavy duty exchangeable blades. They're not replaceable blades. These blades are real thick. They're heavy duty. You resharpen them when they get dull. You don't throw them away. And then eventually, when you've sharpened them to as many times as you possibly can, you can get a new set of them. But they're heavy duty. You just get to exchange them. So, I'll do all the skinning and hide work with the serrated blade. Then I'll switch to my short knife to do all the bones, the tendons, pop the hip sockets apart, all that stuff. And then I save my long blade for like trimming meat back at camp, or, maybe you're going to take those back straps out and cut up a couple of steaks for the fire. Then I'll use my sharp long blade, and that way I can kind of manage the sharpness on all my blades a little bit better. So I like that in my kill kit. The knife sharpener in my kill kit, I usually put a set of neoprene gloves in my kill kit, or rubber gloves. Typically I have a Band-Aid in my kill kit, and I have electrical tape in my kill kit to tape the tag down. I have all that in one little pack, one little cinch bag that I just leave in my pack, and that way I know I have everything I need. So that's the kill kit there. Now, for the backpack, it's a big portion of your hunt because you're going to keep a lot of gear in your backpack. And so really, I use the same pack for both archery and rifle hunts now. We've talked about the history of packs before. And so I started out with a Cabela's bow and rifle pack. It didn't have a frame. I talked through, what I liked and didn't like about that. Then I went to the Eberly stock M5 Team Elk pack. I still have that pack. It's my backup now. And there's a lot of things I liked about that, but now I'm using a Mystery Ranch Metcalf. And I think it's a perfect size pack for the day hunter, for someone that wants to do a couple days of spiking. It's got a lot of super cool features in it. But specifically for rifle hunting, one of the things that I add to my Metcalf pack is I add the Kifaru gun bearer. It's a system where you can have your gun. It has a boot on the hip belt where your stock goes into, and then it's got a loop up on your shoulder strap that straps around the barrel, and it keeps your rifle pointed in a safe direction up at an angle in front of you, so you can always keep your eyes on which direction your barrel is pointed, and it really keeps it secure. And it opens up both of your hands while you're hiking, so you don't have to be constantly carrying your rifle. Or I know a lot of rifles have slings on them, but when you have a backpack on, typically your sling doesn't stay on very well, and you'll constantly have to be holding your sling. And so the nice thing about the Kifaru gun bearer is that it keeps your hands free to use. And so they have a couple different options. You just kind of figure out which style pack you have and which one fits on your pack. And I love that feature. Then I also, because I have my rifle on that, I typically rifle hunt with trekking poles. And the reason for that is I typically have a little bit heavier pack, and we'll get into a couple of the reasons why later. But I like to rifle hunt with trekking poles. Just makes hiking easier, walking easier. You can use them in a pinch as a bipod, and we'll talk about different things there. later, but that's my pack system. It's the same pack as archery. Um, I have all that stuff in it. I like to keep my pack organized, so I bought a bunch of like drawstring bags and cinch bags on Amazon, and so I'll have different sized bags for different things. So like all of my game bags are in one drawstring bag. All of my kill kits in a drawstring bag. My puffy jackets in a drawstring bag. I have a spare set of socks in a drawstring bag. My emergency kit and my possibles kit are in a separate drawstring bag. And so that way, when I open up my pack and I'm looking for something in it, I just have to grab one of those drawstring bags. So it makes it super simple to keep your pack organized, and that is my system for rifle hunting. And so you want to think through your pack, how you're going to transport your rifle, how are you going to transport meat out. I talked a lot about in the archery episode. The reason I like the Metcalf is it's got an integrated meat shelf where you pop the bag out and you put the meat in between the bag and the frame and then cinch it all tight to your back, and it keeps all that weight really close to your center of gravity and makes it really easy to carry a good amount of weight that way. So that's the system. Now we're going to get into some of the fun stuff about a rifle hunt. So the next up, let's talk about glass. When you're rifle hunting, typically glass plays a really important role in the success of your hunt. A lot of times it's glassing and spot and stock hunts. So when I'm rifle hunting, I always have binos on my bino harness, and in that bino harness, I have a pocket for my rangefinder. So those two pieces of glass I actually wear those for archery hunts too. And basically every hunting adventure I go on, I use my same bino harness. Wind indicator, I have a couple spare rifle rounds in there. I maybe have a dope kit or a dope chart in my bino harness for my rifle. I have my tag in my rifle. I usually keep a quick lighter in my rifle and a glass lens cleaner. I keep all that in my bino harness. The other glass that comes important is for a rifle hunt, I'm typically bringing my spotting scope and a tripod too. I want to be able to glass big portions of the landscape effectively and comfortably, and it's really hard to do that without a tripod for certain. Even with your binos, you will not glass as long as you think by just holding your binos up in the air. If you want to get serious about glassing, you need to have a tripod. Now, you can use your tripod with your binos, especially if you have like those 1556s. That's a really good size, or 1250s. You can do a lot of glassing and maybe don't need your tripod for that, but get a lightweight backpacking tripod. Sorry, you might not need your spotting scope for that if you have those nice binoculars, but either way, it really helps to put that on a tripod. That way you can spend the time you need to glass a piece of land and really find and pick out those animals, especially mule deer. Man, mule deer can be tough to glass. Elk are bigger, they don't blend in as well. Antelope are usually don't blend in very well, and they're out in the flats and the plains. Mule deer can be really tricky to glass, and that's where having a tripod and just systematically working through a piece of landscape really helps. But with the spotter, all kinds of spotters work. I think if you want a spotter, it really just depends on what you want to get out of it. Do you want like a super high powered spotter that's a little heavier? Do you want a lightweight spotter that's easier to pack? I know Vortex is just coming out with a extremely small, very powerful spotting scope. I don't remember the specs on it, but I looked at it at the BHA National Rendezvous, and this sucker is light. Perfect for like a backpacking rifle hunt where you want to do some glassing, but you don't want a big spotting scope. Right now, I'm currently using a 20 to 60 power spotting scope with a 80 millimeter objective. It's a pretty big spotting scope. I like being able to really dial in and see, especially if I'm going to bring it. I want to get something that I can do a lot more with than my binos. So I have it. I have that. I have an angled spotter. I originally had a straight spotter, and then I replaced it with an angled because that's all they had. And I will say I enjoy the angled spotter for hunting. I enjoy it more for almost everything except truck scouting. My straight spotter was a little bit better at truck scouting. The angled spotter, you can tilt it, which makes it kind of nice because then you can see a wider range left to right than the straight, right? Because when you move the straight, you can't really, you have to move your head as much as you angle your straight spotter. With an angled spotter, you tip that to the side, and now when you move it, one direction you can see like now almost 90 degrees behind you in a way, and then 90 degrees in front of you. So that's the trade-off there for the truck scouting. If I had to buy another spotter, I think I'd still go with the angled, because you can get over some of the hurdles with truck scouting easier than you can get over some of the hurdles with a straight spotter. Like looking uphill with a straight spotter, you have to lay on the ground, or looking downhill with a straight spotter, you have to get really tall. It just gets a little bit trickier where an angled spotter, you can get by with um, some of those things a little easier just by like tilting it to the side and having that angle shoot sideways versus up. So that's all I have to say about the spotters and the glass. Definitely think through it because it gets heavy. If you're carrying a big heavy tripod and a big heavy spotting scope every day in addition to all your other gear, it can get really heavy really fast. And so you definitely just want to think through all of the gear that you're going to be bringing on this hunt, and how does the glass fit into what style of hunting you're doing. Do you want to just bring the spotter in the truck and use the spotter glassing from the roads, and then when you're going in for the spot and stock, just rely on your binos or your rifle scope? It's a very valid strategy. I've done that a lot of times. Or do you want to hike in, set up a glassing knob, get the tripod out, put the spotting scope on it, and work a piece of landscape? Both things can be very good, very effective methods, and that's just one of the reasons why I typically have trekking poles when I'm rifle hunting, because my pack gets a little bit heavier when I'm rifle hunting. Hey friends, if you're listening to this podcast, I know you're an avid hunter just like myself, and we are always looking to get more time in the woods each season. One of the ways that's helped me get more time in the stand is by using Maverick hunting blinds. When I'm comfortable, I stay in the stand longer and I'm more focused on deer. I don't turn around so my hood cuts the wind. I'm not taking shelter from the rain. And the best way to stay comfortable is with a hard-sided blind. And my favorite is Maverick's XL blind, which allows me to rifle hunt, bow hunt out at the same stand. The best part is Maverick has a blind for every spot. So whether you're looking for a rifle-only option or a bow and rifle, even a round blind to cut down some of that wind resistance, Maverick has you covered. No matter which option you go with, you're going to be comfortable and sit longer in the stand for all of your upcoming hunting seasons. Go to maverickhunting.com and use the code DRAWNWEST, that's one word, DRAWNWEST, to get 10% off your next blind and elevate platform. All right. So now for the main event. Talking gear, we're talking a rifle hunt. Hopefully you're planning your first hunt this season, and you might be thinking to yourself, what caliber do I need and what bullets do I pick? And this topic gets, I would probably say, more attention than the broadhead question we talked about in the archery season, or the archery episode of fixed blade versus mechanicals. Calibers are a great topic, and there's a lot of information here, and just like the archery topic, I don't really get too bent out of shape about calibers. I'll talk about it in a way that kind of breaks it down for a bunch of different things, and I'll talk about what I use, and I'll talk about some things to think through for yourself. So first off, I want to say most people, or it's very easy to get maybe inflated advice when it comes to which caliber. I think some people get a little bit more aggressive on, you need this, or that's way too small, or this won't work for that, or that won't work for this. I'm here to tell you, I think you can make it a little easier than that. So I have a 300 Win Mag. I have used that 300 Win Mag. I've shot antelope does with it all the way up to giant bull elk. A 300 Win Mag will, a lot of people say, oh, that's way too big for antelope. You're going to destroy it. You're going to lose so much damage. That's just simply not true, I don't think. Is it overkill? Yes. You can use a lot smaller calibers a lot more effectively, but most people, they can't buy a rifle for every single thing, as much as we all would like to. And so I'm not that guy. I have one hunting rifle. I literally only have one long gun, long rifle in my name. My grandpa has given me a couple more just recently, but up until then, I had one rifle. I didn't even own a 22. I just use one for everything, and it works well because now I can maybe focus on getting a little bit nicer rifle and a little bit nicer glass because I only need to buy one of them. And another example, in addition to the antelope, is I did a mule deer hunt with a buddy, and I was using the 300 Win Mag for that. He had a 270 Win Mag or Winchester Short Mag. We both shot bucks side by side. The two bucks were side by side. We were side by side. I shot mine. He shot his. I hit a double lung shot on mine, dropped it in its tracks. He shot his a little bit farther forward on the exit because it was a little bit angled. So he came in at a lung and then exited the backside, or it was angling a little bit towards him. He caught a little bit of the front shoulder and then exited the lung. So basically heart, lung, I had double lung. I had a much larger rifle. I was shooting a 300 Win Mag. He was shooting a 270. My mule deer had very little damage and waste on the meat. His mule deer pretty much lost an entire quarter where he hit the front shoulder with his 270. And so what I want to kind of highlight there is the damage that your bullet will cause an animal, I believe, has more to do with where your bullet hits than what caliber you're shooting. If you, like I shot my doe antelope with the 300 Win Mag, I double lunged it. It dropped in its tracks. I had a very, very small amount of bullet damage and meat waste because I didn't hit any major bones. Granted, he hit a leg bone, the big leg bone in the shoulder, and he still got a pass through, but that shoulder exploded, and he ended up having to discard a lot of that front shoulder where his bullet hit. And so the reason I say that is, I think a lot of people would say a 300 is way too big for antelope, but if you put that bullet where it's supposed to be, a nice double lung or a heart shot, but you avoid big leg bones, you can use a gun for almost everything. And so I don't want you to think you have to get a different rifle for antelope, or you have to get a different rifle for deer. Get a rifle that works for you. And so let's talk about some caliber options that I would recommend looking into. So there's a couple that I think are timeless. There's a couple calibers out there that have withstood the test of time. They're very common. They're very popular. There's ammo everywhere for them. If you're looking for a first rifle for a Western hunt, I would stick with popular brands or popular calibers with lots of ammo options. Don't get into the weeds with like a 283 Ackley or a 300 dash whatever. Stick to some of these tried and true calibers, or at least start there, because it's easier to find ammo. Something happens, it's easier to get repairs or parts. It's just a lot easier when you stick with some of these timeless calibers. And so what are they? The 30-06, super timeless caliber. I would say a 30-06 can probably do everything in North America. The 270 Win Mag, super popular caliber. Probably also can do most things in North America. Might be getting a little bit light for moose if that's on your radar, or dangerous game if that's on your radar, but for the most part, it's pretty good for the lower 48. Can get you everything you need. A 308, very timeless caliber, can pretty much do everything in North America in the lower 48. More deer and elk have been killed with a 308 and a 30-06 than probably any other caliber. A 7 millimeter Magnum, very timeless caliber, can't go wrong with that. The 300 Win Mag, 300 Short Mag, those are very common calibers. That's getting pretty hot. That a 300 Win Mag and a 300 Short Mag are probably the highest energy calibers on the list so far. That's what I have because I do a lot of elk hunting, and it's a great caliber for elk. It is a little bit extra for deer, and it's quite a bit extra for antelope, but you can do both of those. And so all of those calibers that we talked about, 270, 7 mag, 308, 30-06, 300 Win Mag, those calibers, if you get one of those, you can pretty much do any North American animal, especially any or lower 48 animal. Those are tried and true calibers. Now, if elk and moose and dangerous game are not on your radar whatsoever, and you are just looking for a deer and an antelope gun, there's a couple more options that you could maybe look at. 243, great caliber. Might not have quite the distance on mule deer as some of the others would. Like a 270 would have a little bit more range and carry out that energy a little bit farther. But if you're looking for like an antelope gun, a 243 would be phenomenal. A 7mm08, which is a 7 millimeter a bullet with a smaller casing, a little bit less energy, a lot less kick and recoil, if that's something that's interesting to you, and a perfect caliber for deer and antelope. My niece even killed an elk with a 7mm08, so it can do the elk. 6.5 Creedmoor, obviously that's a very common, popular caliber now. There's a lot of debate and emotion about the 6.5 Creedmoor. Is it a hunting rifle round? Is it a long range caliber? So a quick, down and dirty on the 6.5 Creed. That bullet, it got really popular with long range shooters, and this is my opinion now. I believe when a bullet's popular for long range shooters, then the hunting community goes, well, if it's such an accurate bullet that the long range guys are using it, it must be a perfect hunting rifle. Like that's what I want to use for hunting because it's so accurate. Well, in the case of the 6.5 Creedmoor, its ballistics are really, really good. It has a good sectional density, but it doesn't really make a difference until you get out to like 800 yards. Inside 800 yards, or especially 600 yards, it's really not much different than other calibers, and it has less energy than a lot of other calibers. So in a hunting situation, you're not going to see the benefits of the accuracy, and you're going to have a little bit of a trade-off on the energy than if you had a 270 Win Mag or a 7mm08. But it's still a plenty good caliber, and there's tons of ammo. It doesn't kick very much. It's a perfect size for antelope and deer. Phenomenal rifle caliber for antelope and deer, and it can do elk. I mean, if you get the right bullet configuration, it's definitely a lethal elk round. I would maybe say it's not going to carry the energy out quite as far as maybe a 270 Win or a 300 Win Mag. So if you're going to go elk hunting with a 6.5 Creedmoor, maybe just keep that in mind, and maybe not take the 400-yard shot, sneak into 250, 300. You don't want to put yourself in a position with any of these calibers where you're on the borderline, right? You're shooting at a distance and the bullet hits in a place where now you're in a borderline condition. You want to have confidence that when you take that shot, that bullet's going to be in the right spot and it's going to have plenty of energy to do the job. And so that's why I typically lean on the larger side of the equation than the smaller side of the equation. But I'm a big guy. I can carry a heavier rifle. I can take more recoil. I have a big muzzle brake on my rifle to reduce that recoil and manage it. And so that's kind of where I think calibers are. You don't have to go into the weeds. You don't have to pick a super specific, unique caliber to be special. There's so many good calibers out there to choose from. And if you're having any doubts about which caliber to pick, feel free to shoot me a message or an email and tell me what you're going after and what your thought process is, and I will gladly help pick a caliber or give some thoughts on what I think based on what you are looking for in a rifle. I'd love to help you out. But don't get too bought up in it. If you've got elk on the mind, elk is the big draw. Go with a 300. Go with a 30 caliber something, whether it's a 308, 30-06, 300 Win Mag, 300 short mag. All of those are perfect calibers. You don't need to go any bigger than that unless you want to. You don't need a 325 Winchester short mag. You don't need a 338 Lapua. Those are way too big. They're extra. You don't need that. It's harder to find ammo. You don't need that. They hit harder and higher recoil. You don't need that. Um, you could even do probably a 270 Win Mag for elk and maybe just not shoot quite as far. Maybe don't take the 500-yard shot. Just look at how the energy travels and transfers, but you want to have plenty of energy to where you kill that elk with confidence. But that's, yeah, if you're going to be doing mostly elk hunting with the occasional deer and the sporadic antelope, I'd pick a rifle for elk and you can do the rest. That's how I choose my rifles. And those four I mentioned are all solid rifles for that. If you only care about deer, I'm never going to hunt elk. Or if I do hunt elk, I already got a rifle for that, but I'm picking a deer rifle. Well, then you have options. You can still stick with the 300 Win Mag and get like nice long range energy, a good bullet, lots of potential energy and kinetic energy to put that deer down. You could go, but you could also do like the 270 Win Mag, the 6.5 Creedmoor, a 243. Those are all great calibers as well for the deer, and they will work for antelope. 7mm08, another great caliber for deer and antelope. And if you're like, hey, I have the big rifles, I'm thinking of a small caliber rifle for antelope. It's hard to beat the 243. It's super common, super reliable. There's ammo everywhere. It doesn't recoil at all. It's plenty of energy for an antelope. I really like it. There's a lot of cool things about a 243. Now, there are a couple new calibers coming out that are interesting. There's the 26 Nosler. That's kind of like a 6.5 Creedmoor size with a little bit more energy. So that could be a good antelope and deer rifle. There's the 28 Nosler, which is a 280 caliber, which is kind of like your 270 Win Mag with a little bit more energy. That's a nice caliber. That's a very interesting caliber as well. And then there's the 30 Nosler, which is like a 300 Win Mag with a little bit more energy. Those are super cool and interesting. There's the 300 PRC. There's the 6.5 PRC. 6.5 Grendel, which I don't think I would probably pick over a Creedmoor. There's a lot of other rifle calibers out there that are a little bit more nuanced, and you just have to look at what ammo availability is like and how much the ammo costs. I know when I bought my rifle, I was really interested in the 28 and 30 Noslers, but you couldn't find ammo for it because they had just came out, and I needed ammo for my hunt, so I picked a more an older caliber. And so that's what I think on calibers. Keep it simple. Use the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. Don't go crazy. Pick a caliber where there's lots of information, lots of data, lots of bullets, lots of ammo to choose from. Now, let's dive into the ammo. There's a couple different ways you can go with ammo. You can get a jacketed a lead jacketed bullet, so it's going to have a lead core with like a copper alloy jacket. They're all going to be either hollow point, or like a polymer tipped bullet, so that helps with your expansion, right? You want this bullet to open up and mushroom out and create a larger wound channel and transfer more energy from the bullet to the animal. That's why they have these hollow points and polymer tips. You would not want like a full metal jacket or a target round, nothing like that. Hard casts, you wouldn't want any of those because they won't transfer as much energy. They won't cause as much of a wound channel. You won't have as much of a blood channel. They could still kill the animal, but it wouldn't be as what you would want. So you can either go copper coated lead core bullet. You can go monolithic, or a solid copper bullet is two ways they'd call that. And those bullets are usually like a solid copper alloy with a deeper hollow point to have expansion. Or you can use like a partition bullet. So like the Nosler partition was one of the OG bullets for big game, because what they did was they took a lead core bullet, they wrapped the core with copper, and then they have a separate compartment up front with that coated with that hollow point tip and a lead basically triangle. And so what happens is that lead tip, or that hollow point tip, opens up and mushrooms really nice, but the partition, the back part of it that's completely encapsulated with copper, sticks together really well, so you don't lose that mass. a complete lead bullet typically has a bad rep for fragmentation, and it kind of breaks apart and disintegrates when you hit flesh or bone. And this partition keeps its mass better, so it transfers more energy and gets more penetration. So those are kind of the three options. Now, I am becoming a rapid fan of monolithic bullets. A couple reasons for that. I don't like eating lead. All lead bullets will fragment to a certain degree. The partitions are better. Partition style bullets are better than complete solid lead cores. But they will all fragment to some degree, and it can be really hard to pick out all that lead, and it can travel. If you do some of the research on it, these lead particles can travel quite a long ways inside the cavity of your animal, and you could potentially be ingesting lead. So that's one thing I don't like about the lead core bullets. Another thing that I like about monolithic or the solid copper bullets, they don't fragment at all. Like 97% weight retention compared to like 80% weight retention on a partition. Well, if you look at the energy, then they keep more of their mass, so they have more potential energy to transfer to the animal. Or sorry, they keep more of their mass, so they have more momentum to get penetration through the animal. If you have a bullet that completely disintegrates with no exit, you transferred 100% of your energy to the animal. But I really like, number one, I really like exit wounds. Just like archery hunting, I want 2 holes to blood track my animal in. And I don't want to be eating all that lead fragments in the meat. So I don't want my bullet to completely fragment. I just want it to mushroom and open up and keep a solid wound channel. The copper bullets are really good at that. They also shoot faster, typically. You want solid copper bullets faster than lead because it takes more energy to open them up. So you usually get a little bit lighter bullet that shoots a little bit faster. So I just really like the copper bullets. And if you look at the math, if you had a 300 Win Mag, which is my rifle, so I know the calibers and the bullets a little better. If you had a 180 grade lead core bullet and you lose 20% of its mass when it opens up, you're losing a potential 36 grains of weight. Compare that to a 165 grain monolithic or copper bullet, that would probably be the comparison, because you won't find a 180 grain monolithic likely. You drop that down to a 165 copper, shoots faster and flatter, and you only lose 3% of its weight, or roughly 44.9 grains of weight. And so the difference is like that 180 is going to hit like a 144, right? When it loses those 36 grains, you're going to have 144 left. That 165 is going to hit like a 160. So you're actually retaining more bullet weight. People always say, hey, I want a big bullet. I want a big, heavy bullet, hit hard with tons of energy. Like, copper bullets are going to hit just as hard as lead bullets, but you don't have to worry about eating any of the lead. So that's why I picked monolithic copper bullets. As far as weights go, for elk, I do like a 180 grain bullet. I might consider doing 165. I've used 200s before, and I just didn't like it was excessive and I didn't need it. So now I'm using a 180 grain monolithic for my elk, and then for deer, and I use that same bullet for deer and antelope. But if I was gonna build a bullet specifically for deer and antelope, I would probably drop the deer bullet down to like 125 grains to 150 grains, depending on what your calibers are, right? With my 300 Win Mag, about the lightest bullet I can shoot through it is a 150. And so for deer, I like a really light, fast bullet. I think there's just been lots of, I've read books going all the way back to Teddy Roosevelt memoirs saying that they, hunting mule deer in the Badlands of North Dakota, have found and have started to investigate, the heavier bullets typically don't knock the deer down as fast as the people that were shooting a lighter, faster bullet. Typically, the deer collapsed and just dropped on the spot, and they didn't have to track, and they had a lot more clean, efficient kills. And so that's why I've been, just kind of leaning towards a faster bullet, just higher speeds. And if I do that by going to 150 grain out of my 300 Win Mag, hopefully to just ethically and humanely, have that animal expire rather than hitting them with a heavier, slower bullet and having them run off and having a blood trail. So that's kind of where I'm at with the bullet weights. Antelope, obviously, you can go a lot lighter, and a lot of your dedicated antelope calibers are going to have lighter bullets. So keep that in mind. Bullet bullet selection's a big part of the equation. I would say, pick a solid hunting bullet from a reputable brand. There's a lot of reputable brands out there. Federal Premium, Nosler, Winchester, Remington, Hornady. Those brands have all got a solid option when it comes to hunting bullets. I really like Nosler. They're a family-owned business. I really like that about them. I like Federal. I think it's just because I grew up shooting a lot of Federals. I've used Winchesters and I've used Hornadys. I don't use as much Remington anymore, and there's reasons for that. You can do some research out there, but those four especially all have solid options. And so pick a good quality hunting bullet. For elk, I would recommend being on the heavier end of your caliber. So like if you have a 6.5 Creedmoor, the heaviest you can really get is like 145, 143. If you have a 300 Win Mag, you can get all the way up into 215, but maybe 180. I'd say 150 is about as light as I'd want to go for elk. I'd want to be up closer to 165, 165 or 180 for your caliber, unless you're shooting a lighter caliber that just doesn't have bullets that heavy. But then if that's the case, I would reduce my maximum shooting range from maybe right now. My maximum shooting range on an elk is 500 yards. I don't take shots longer than that. If I was shooting like a 6.5 Creedmoor or a 7mm 08, I'd bring that into maybe 350. Based on, I'd have to really dive into the ballistics and the energies, but probably 350, which is still a very long shot. And I do not enjoy long shots. I want to be as close as possible. For deer, I think it opens up a lot more. You can use 180s if you've already got your gun sighted in for it. I think 150 and 165s are really good weights. 140s, 143s, and the Creedmoors, and the 135 for a 7mm weight. Those are all plenty fine weights. And then antelope, 90 grains. Anything 90 and above is probably a good weight to be in for your um, antelope hunting. So that's a little bit about bullet selection. If you have any questions on bullet selection, or you just can't decide between two calibers and you want a second opinion, feel free to reach out with that as well. I'll be happy to say, hey, this is what I like about that bullet. This is what I like about this bullet. Here's some of the things I would think about. I'll never tell anyone they're wrong for a bullet that they pick unless it's, not a hunting bullet. If it's a target bullet, I would be like, hey, I don't think you want to use that. But there's a lot of good hunting bullets out there. Just pick a reputable one from a reputable brand. And then the last thing is optics. So one of the big things I think about when I pick a hunting rifle optic, I like to be able to dial my shots. I don't always do it, but I like to be able to dial. So for sure, elevation, I like that aspect of it. I do also like to dial windage. And so I've been using the Vortex PST Viper Gen 2 a lot. I really love that scope. And I'm probably going to put the a first focal plane. That one's a first focal plane. I like first focal plane scopes. If you don't know what the first focal plane versus second focal plane scopes are, second focal plane scopes are what is most common. Most of the scopes you look through are second focal plane. When your reticle is the same size, no matter which magnification you're dialed into, that's a second focal plane scope. It's probably what you grew up with. A first focal plane scope, when you're zoomed out, the reticle gets smaller. And when you zoom in, the reticle gets bigger. And what happens is why that's important, is that means your reticle is always in the same relation to your target, right? When you're zoomed out, those reticles look small, but they're the same distance apart on your target, which means you can always use your reticle to measure. Second focal plane scopes, the reticle stays the same size. So when you zoom in, it's a lot narrower than when you zoom out. When you're zoomed out, that reticle is now wider apart on your target, which means you can't use your reticle the same way at all magnifications. I like first focal plane scopes. I like to be able to dial. They're a little bit more, take a little bit more practice, but I do like that. And then when I'm out west, I like to be 12, 15, power scopes is I like to be above that. Me and my wife both shoot a 5 to 25 power scope. And I do dial in. I mean, when I have time, I zoom all the way in. I make sure I can really accurately pick out where I want that bullet to go and focus in on that animal. I use a 3x9 for whitetail hunting here in Minnesota. I think it can be done, but I do like a little bit more out west. 4 to 12, 3 to 15, 4 to 16, those are all great options. And then from there, it kind of just depends on how much money you want to spend on an optic. But I do like to get out a little bit more than a 3x9. So just keep that in mind when you're picking out your rifle. And that brings us to the end. Everything you need to plan a successful Western rifle hunt from start to finish, all the gear that I use, that I trust, the systems I've built throughout the years in the hunts right here. And so thank you for listening. Thanks for being here, folks. Give us a shout out. Whether you liked us repurposing some of this great content from the previous show, what your thoughts were, be honest. Feel free to give us a comment on whatever app or platform you're listening on. Send us an email, brian@getdrawnwest.com. Head over to Instagram, getdrawnwest, and send us a DM. Whether you liked it, you hated it, you want more, want less, let me know. Love hearing from you guys. Love it when you all reach out with questions. So feel free to reach out on this episode and let me know what you thought of the content and finding ways to use all of the great conversations that we've created over the years to bring more value to each and every one of you. So thank you once again. And until next time, stay drawn.